The lonely ranch stretched across the edge of the open plains where the earth seemed to breathe its solitude into the endless sky. A patchwork of battered fences and barns stood weather-worn, each one bearing the silence of years gone by. Samuel Carter walked the dirt paths like a man both rooted and exiled. Broad shoulders carried a weight no one could see. Nearly 10 years had passed since his wife had been taken by fever, and though the sharp edge of grief had dulled with time, what remained was colder emptiness that clung like a shadow. At night the wind sang through the shutters of his house. The silence in the rooms was heavier than any sermon could be. Folks in the nearby town of Dry Creek whispered that Samuel was wasting his land. Without a wife or children, they said, the Carter name would disappear like a trail swallowed in dust. Samuel never answered them. He rose with the dawn and worked until the stars came, his loneliness tied to him as tight as a second skin. One late afternoon, as storm clouds bruised the horizon, he heard a cry, thin, desperate, carried on the wind. He followed it past a corral to the old stable, where a wagon wheel had splintered and collapsed on someone trapped beneath its heavy weight. There, struggling in the straw and dirt, was a woman he had never seen before. Her hair, black as coal and damp with sweat, clung to her cheeks. Her eyes flashed with both fury and desperation. She had been hauling a small cart by herself, and the broken wheel had pinned her against a wooden frame. Without a word, Samuel crouched, pressed his palms against the wood, and heaved with every ounce of strength he carried. Muscles strained, his breath burned in his chest, but at last the weight shifted and broke free. The woman tumbled out, catching herself on her raw palms, her chest heaving. For a long moment neither spoke. Rain began to fall, drumming on the roof and filling the air with the sharp scent of wet earth. She rose slowly, straightening her torn skirt, pride sharpening her expression. "Don, think this makes me owe you," she said, her voice firm though it wavered at the edges. "I could be handled it." Samuel almost smiled, but he did. He only offered his hand. She ignored it and brushed past him toward the barn door. "The storm will get worse," he said quietly. "Best stay inside." Her laugh was quick, sharp, a blade against his calm. "I'd sooner take my chances with the rain than take shelter from a lonely rancher." The words cut deeper than she knew, but Samuel let her go without protest. Yet when the downpour thickened into a curtain, she returned. Soaked to the bone, her jaw tight with stubbornness, Samuel lit a lantern and set it between them as they sat on opposite bales of hay. The silence stretched long, taut as wire. At last she spoke. Her name was Isabella Cruz. She told him she had lost her family to fever and wandered between towns where her mixed blood drew suspicion instead of kindness. Her words weren't a plea for pity, just the weary pride of someone too used to survival. The storm raged on. Samuel poured her coffee, strong and bitter, and she accepted it without thanks. Though her hands lingered on the warmth of the tin cup, she caught him watching and let out a laugh, softer this time, though still edged with caution. "Don't fool yourself, rancher. Folks say men like you need someone to fill the emptiness, someone to keep the name alive before the land swallows you whole. That one me." Samuel said nothing, but her words struck deeper than any gossip in town. Her laughter echoed in his ears that night after she left. It mingled with Clara Jenkins' chatter at the Mercantile and Sheriff Hardin's quiet warnings. Shame had many tongues, and they all spoke the same truth. Samuel Carter was a man without a future. Still, he found himself watching for her. Days later he left bread on the fence post by the road. When he passed again, the bread was gone, but the cloth was folded neatly in its place. Weeks slid into a rhythm of unspoken exchanges, a pail of water left by his porch, a mended coat draped over a fence, herbs tucked near his door. Each small act was both denial and confession, a quiet conversation without words. But gossip never rested. Clara Jenkins whispered that Samuel kept company with a woman too proud to beg, yet too desperate to walk away. Sheriff Hardin muttered about reputation, about watchful neighbors. "Let them talk," Samuel finally said, his gaze fixed on the horizon. When the next storm hit, fiercer than the last, Isabella returned. Her clothes were soaked through, her eyes wide with fear buried beneath defiance. The barn had flooded, and she had nowhere else to turn. Samuel built the fire high, its heat drawing steam from their clothes. He handed her a blanket. When her fingers brushed his, the air tightened, charged with something neither of them dared to name. Her laughter did come that night. Instead, she sat closer, as if his presence itself steadied the storm outside. In the days that followed, their silence grew heavier, filled with meanings unspoken. She noticed how his scarred, rough hands could be gentle, how he set a wild colt carefully back on its legs. He noticed how her eyes softened, when she left bread cooling on his table, or how her shoulders eased when she lingered by the fire. Still, no words were exchanged, and still the town's whispers grew louder, crueler. Clara called Isabella a beggar, clinging to a lonely man as land. When Samuel walked through Dry Creek beside her to fetch supplies, conversation died on porches, and windows narrowed with watching eyes. Isabella lifted her chin, her pride intact, but back at the ranch, her hands trembled as she removed her shawl. Samuel did speak. He simply placed his calloused palm over hers, steady, grounding her without words. The reckoning came at the church. Sheriff Hawden stood in the front while Clara's voice carried sharp and shrill. "It's disgraceful, Samuel," she hissed. "Wasting your land on a woman who brings no honor, no name, no future." The congregation murmured in agreement, their disapproval heavy as smoke. Samuel stood tall, but the weight of their judgment pressed like a storm with no break. Isabella lingered in the back, pale-faced but burning-eyed. When Clara's words struck their cruelest, a rancher too desperate to see he's become a fool, Isabella stepped forward. The room hushed. "You speak of honor as though it's yours to hand out," she said, her voice steady though her breath shook. "This man gave me shelter when I had nothing. He asked nothing in return. If that is shame, then I'll wear it proudly." Her words hung in the air, trembling with both defiance and truth. Samuel's jaw clenched. He scanned the faces around him, then looked back at her. His voice was low but rolled like thunder. "I've lived in silence too long. This land is mine, but so is my right to decide who belongs here, and I choose her." A ripple spread through the crowd, some in anger, some in uneasy silence. Clara's mouth tightened, but no reply came. Even the sheriff's eyes faltered. Samuel crossed the room and took Isabella's hand. His rough palm closed around her trembling fingers. It was a simple gesture, but it felt like a vow. For the first time since his wife's passing, the hollow inside him cracked open. They left the church together, the night air cool and fragrant with rain-washed earth. The whispers followed, but neither turned back. At the ranch, lantern light spilled warm across the stable walls. They stood close, the distance between them filled with unspoken truths. Isabella's laughter, once mocking, was quieter now, softer. Her eyes lifted to his, searching, and in them Samuel saw trust, fragile yet unbreakable. She did need to speak. The look in her gaze was louder than any vow. The night stretched long and gentle. Outside, the prairie winds sighed through the grass, carrying the hush of something ancient. Inside, silence became its own language, each glance, each breath, each touch saying more than words ever could. Where shame had once lived, something else bloomed. Strength, dignity, and the beginnings of a bond that could outlast any scorn. By dawn, the storm had passed. The sky blushed gold. The earth steamed, fragrant with new rain. Samuel stepped into the morning with Isabella at his side, their hands brushing. The ranch no longer felt hollow. The land no longer echoed with silence. Something had shifted, fragile yet firm, born of defiance, trust, and the stubborn courage to belong. And if Dry Creek still whispered, the prairie winds carried their words away. For in the end, it isn't gossip that shapes a life, nor judgment nor fear. It is the quiet kind of love that refuses to yield, the kind that turns loneliness into belonging and silence into sanctuary. Remember this: the truest legacies aren't built on the approval of others, but on the courage to stand beside another soul when the world demands you stand alone. And hey, if you are listening to this story right now, make sure you hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and drop your thoughts in the comments. It really helps us bring more stories like this your way. That night, as the ranch settled into calm, Samuel and Isabella, the silence spoke louder than any promise. Neither of them had asked for this path, yet both had chosen it, and that choice made all the difference. Their story reminds us, when the world says you should walk alone, sometimes the bravest thing you can do is take another hand and walk together. Before we wrap up, don't forget once again, please subscribe to this channel, like this video, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Your support is what keeps these stories alive.